Hi guys. Today we have chapters 8 and 9 of The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is public domain. Chapter 8, The Deadly Poppy Field. Our little party of travelers awakened the next morning, refreshed and full of hope, and Dorothy breakfasted like a princess off of peaches and plums from the trees beside the river. Behind them was the dark forest they had passed safely through, although they had suffered many discouragements. But before them was a lovely sunny countryside that seemed to beckon them to the Emerald City. To be sure, the broad river now cut them off from this beautiful land, but the raft was nearly done. And after the Tin Woodsman had cut a few more logs and fastened them together with wooden pins, they were ready to start. Dorothy sat down in the middle of the raft and held Toto in her arms. When the Cowardly Lion stepped upon the raft, it tipped badly, for he was big and heavy. But the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodsman stood upon the other end to steady it, and they had long poles in their hands to push the raft through the water. They got along quite well at first, but when they reached the middle of the river, the swift current swept the raft down further and further away from the road of yellow brick. And the water grew so deep that the long poles would not touch the bottom. "This is bad," said the Tin Woodsman, "for if we cannot get to the land, we shall be carried into the country of the Wicked Witch of the West, and she will enchant us to make us her slaves." "And then I should get no brains," said the Scarecrow. "And I should get no courage," said the Cowardly Lion. "And I should get no heart," said the Tin Woodsman. "And I should never get back to Kansas," said Dorothy. "We must certainly get to the Emerald City if we can," the Scarecrow continued, and he pushed so hard on his long pole that it stuck fast in the mud at the bottom of the river, and before he could pull it out again or let go, the raft was swept away, and the poor Scarecrow left standing on the pole in the middle of the river. "Goodbye," he called after them, and they were very sorry to leave him. Indeed, the Tin Woodsman began to cry, but fortunately remembered that he might rust, and so dried his tears on Dorothy's apron. Of course, this was a bad thing for the Scarecrow. "I am now worse off than when I first met Dorothy," he thought. "Then I was stuck on a pole in a cornfield, where I could make believe scare the crows, at any rate. But surely there is no use for a Scarecrow stuck on a pole in the middle of a river. I'm afraid I shall never have any brains after all." Down the stream the raft floated, and the poor Scarecrow was left behind. Then the Lion said, "Something must be done to save us. I think I can swim to the shore and pull the raft after me, if you will only hold fast to the tip of my tail." So he sprang into the water, and the Tin Woodsman caught fast hold of his tail, and the Lion began to swim with all his might toward the shore. It was hard work, although he was so big, but by and by they were drawn out of the current, and then Dorothy took the Tin Woodsman's long pole and helped push the raft to the land. They were all tired out when they reached the shore at last and stepped upon the pretty green grass. And they also knew that the stream had carried them a long way past the road of yellow brick that led to the Emerald City. "What shall we do now?" asked the Tin Woodsman, as the Lion lay down in the grass to let the sun dry him. "We must get back to the road in some way," said Dorothy. "The best plan would be to walk along the river bank until we come to the road again," remarked the Lion. So when they were rested, Dorothy picked up her basket, and they started along the grassy bank back to the road from which the river had carried them. It was lovely country, with plenty of flowers and fruit trees, and sunshine to cheer them. And had they not felt so sorry for the poor Scarecrow, they could have been very happy. They walked along as fast as they could, Dorothy only stopping once to pick a beautiful flower. And after a time, the Tin Woodsman cried out, "Look!" Then they all looked at the river and saw the Scarecrow perched upon his pole in the middle of the water, looking very lonely and sad. "What can we do to save him?" asked Dorothy. The Lion and the Woodsman both shook their heads, for they did not know. So they sat down on the bank and gazed wistfully at the Scarecrow until a stork flew by, which, seeing them, stopped to rest at the water's edge. "Who are you, and where are you going?" asked the stork. "I am Dorothy," answered the girl, And these are my friends, the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion, and we are going to the Emerald City." "This isn't the road," said the stork, as she twisted her long neck and looked sharply at the queer party. "I know it," returned Dorothy, "but we have lost the Scarecrow and are wondering how we shall get him again." "Where is he?" asked the stork. "Over there, in the river," answered the girl. "If he wasn't so big and heavy, I could get him for you," remarked the stork. "He isn't heavy a bit," said Dorothy eagerly, "for he's stuffed with straw. And if you will bring him back to us, we shall thank you ever and ever so much." "Well, I'll try," said the stork. "But if I find he's too heavy to carry, I shall have to drop him in the river again." So the big bird flew into the air and over the water, till she came to where the Scarecrow was perched upon his pole. Then the stork, with her great claws, grabbed the Scarecrow by the arm and carried him up into the air and back to the bank, where Dorothy and the Lion and the Tin Woodman and Toto were sitting. When the Scarecrow found himself among his friends again, he was so happy that he hugged them all, even the Lion and Toto. As they walked along, he sang "Tol-de-ri-de-o" at every step. He felt so happy. "I was afraid I should have to stay in the river forever," he said, "but the kind stork saved me, and if I ever get any brains, I shall find the stork again and do it some kindness in return." "That's all right," said the stork, who was flying along beside them. "I always like to help anyone in trouble. But I must go now, for my babies are waiting in the nest for me. I hope you will find the Emerald City and that Oz will help you." "Thank you," replied Dorothy, and then the kind stork flew into the air and was soon out of sight. They walked along, listening to the singing of the bright-colored birds and looking at the lovely flowers, which now became so thick that the ground was carpeted with them. There were big yellow and white and blue and purple blossoms, besides great clusters of scarlet poppies, which were so brilliant in color that they almost dazzled Dorothy's eyes. "Aren't they beautiful?" the girl asked as she breathed in the spicy scent of the flowers. "I suppose so," said the Scarecrow. "When I have brains, I shall probably like them better." "If I only had a heart, I should love them," added the Tin Woodman. "I always did like flowers," said the Lion. "They seem so helpless and frail, but there are none in the forest so bright as these." They now came upon more and more of the big scarlet poppies and fewer of the other flowers, and soon they found themselves in the midst of a great meadow of poppies. Now it is well known that when there are many of these flowers together, their odor is so powerful that anyone who breathes it falls asleep. And if the sleeper is not carried away from the scent of the flowers, he sleeps on and on forever. But Dorothy did not know this, nor could she get away from the bright red flowers that were everywhere about. So presently her eyes grew heavy, and she felt she must sit down to rest and to sleep. But the Tin Woodman would not let her do this. "We must hurry and get back to the road of yellow brick before dark," he said, and the Scarecrow agreed with him. So they kept walking until Dorothy could stand no longer. Her eyes closed in spite of herself, and she forgot where she was and fell among the poppies, fast asleep. "What shall we do?" asked the Tin Woodman. "If we leave her here, she will die," said the Lion. "The smell of the flowers is killing us all. I myself can scarcely keep my eyes open, and the dog is asleep already." It was true. Toto had fallen down beside his little mistress, but the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, not being made of flesh, were not troubled by the scent of the flowers. "Run fast," said the Scarecrow to the Lion, "and get out of this deadly flower bed as soon as you can. We will bring the little girl with us, but if you should fall asleep, you are too big to be carried." So the Lion aroused himself and bounded forward as fast as he could go. In a moment, he was out of sight. "Let us make a chair with our hands and carry her," said the Scarecrow. So they picked up Toto and put the dog in Dorothy's lap, and then they made a chair with their hands for the seat and their arms for the arms, and carried the sleeping girl between them through the flowers. On and on they walked, and it seemed that the great carpet of deadly flowers that surrounded them would never end. They followed the bend of the river and at last came upon their friend the Lion, lying fast asleep among the poppies. The flowers had been too strong for the huge beast, and he had given up at last and fallen only a short distance from the end of the poppy bed. where the sweet grass spread in beautiful green fields before them. "We can do nothing for him," said the Tin Woodman sadly, "for he is much too heavy to lift. We must leave him here to sleep on forever, and perhaps he will dream that he has found courage at last." "I'm sorry," said the Scarecrow. "The lion was a very good comrade for one so cowardly. But let us go on." They carried the sleeping girl to a pretty spot beside the river, far enough from the poppy field to prevent her breathing in any more of the poison of the flowers. And here they laid her gently on the soft grass and waited for the fresh breeze to waken her. All right, now, Chapter 9, The Queen of the Field Mice. "We cannot be far from the road of yellow brick now," remarked the Scarecrow as he stood beside the girl, "for we have come nearly as far as the river carried us away." The Tin Woodman was about to reply when he heard a low growl, and turning his head, which worked beautifully on its hinges, he saw a strange beast come bounding over the grass towards them. It was indeed a great yellow wildcat. And the woodsman thought it must be chasing something, for its ears were lying close to its head and its mouth was wide open, showing 2 rows of ugly teeth, where its red eyes glowed like balls of fire. As it came nearer, the Tin Woodman saw that running before the beast was a little gray field mouse. And although he had no heart, he knew it was wrong for the wildcat to try and kill such a pretty, harmless creature. So the woodsman raised his axe, and as the wildcat ran by, gave it a good, quick blow and cut the beast's head clean off from its body, and it rolled over its feet in 2 pieces. The field mouse, now that it was freed from its enemy, stopped short, and coming slowly up to the woodsman, it said in a squeaky little voice, "Oh, thank you! Thank you ever so much for saving my life." "Don't speak of it, I beg of you," replied the woodsman. "I have no heart, you know, so I am careful to help all those who may need a friend, even if it happens to be only a mouse." "Only a mouse?" cried the little animal indignantly. "Why, I am a queen, the queen of all the field mice." "Oh, indeed," said the woodsman, making a bow. "Therefore you have done a great deed, as well as a brave one, in saving my life," added the queen. At that moment, several mice were seen running up as fast as their little legs could carry them. And when they saw their queen, they exclaimed, "Oh, your majesty, we thought you would be killed! How did you manage to escape the great wildcat?" And they all bowed so low to the little queen, they almost stood upon their heads. "This funny tin man," she answered, "killed the wildcat and saved my life. So hereafter you must all serve him and obey his slightest wish." "We will!" cried all the mice in shrill chorus. And they scampered in all directions, for Toto had awakened from his sleep, and seeing all the mice around him, he gave one bark of delight and jumped right into the middle of the group. Toto had always loved to chase mice when he lived in Kansas, and he saw no harm in it. But the Tin Woodman caught the dog in his arms and held him tight while he called to the mice, "Come back, come back! Toto shall not hurt you." At this, the Queen of Mice stuck her head out from underneath a clump of grass and asked in a timid voice, "Are you sure he will not bite us?" "I will not let him," said the woodsman, "so do not be afraid." One by one, the mice came creeping back, and Toto did not bark again, although he tried to get out of the woodsman's arms and would have bitten him had he not known very well that he was made of tin. Finally, one of the biggest mice spoke. "Is there anything we can do," he asked, "to repay you for saving the life of our queen?" "Nothing that I know of," answered the woodsman, but the Scarecrow, who had been trying to think, but could not because his head was stuffed with straw, said quickly, "Oh, yes! You can save our friend the Cowardly Lion, who is asleep in the poppy bed." "A lion?" cried the little queen. "Why, he would eat us all up." "Oh, no," declared the Scarecrow, "this lion is a coward." "Really?" asked the mice. "He says so himself," answered the Scarecrow, "and he would never hurt anyone who is our friend. If you will help us to save him, I promise that he shall treat you all with kindness." "Very well," said the queen. "We will trust you, but what shall we do?" "Are there many of these mice which call you queen and are willing to obey you?" "Oh, yes, there are thousands," she replied. "Then send for them all to come here as soon as possible, and let each one bring a long piece of string." The queen turned to the mice that attended her and told them to go at once and get all of her people. As soon as they heard her orders, they ran away in every direction as fast as possible. "Now," said the Scarecrow to the Tin Woodman, "you must go to those trees by the river and make a trunk that will carry the lion. Make a truck that will carry the lion." So the woodsman went at once to the trees and began to work. And he soon made a truck out of those limbs of trees, from which he chopped away all the leaves and branches. He fastened it together with wooden pegs and made the 4 wheels out of short pieces of big tree trunk. So fast and so well did he work that by the time the mice had begun to arrive, the truck was all ready for them. They came from all directions, and there were thousands of them. Big mice and little mice and middle-sized mice, and each one brought a piece of string in its mouth. It was about this time that Dorothy awoke from her long sleep and opened her eyes. She was greatly astonished to find herself upon the grass, with thousands of mice standing around and looking at her timidly. But the Scarecrow told her about everything, and turning to the dignified little mouse, he said, "Permit me to introduce to you Her Majesty the Queen." Dorothy nodded gravely, and the Queen made a curtsy, after which she became quite friendly with the little girl. The Scarecrow and the Woodsman now began to fasten the mice to the truck, using the strings they had brought. One end of the string was tied around the neck of each mouse, and the other to the truck. Of course, the truck was 1,000 times bigger than any of the mice who were to draw it. But when all the mice had been harnessed, they were able to pull it quite easily. Even the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodsman could sit in it, and were drawn swiftly by their queer little horses to the places where the lion lay asleep. After a great deal of hard work, for the lion was heavy, they managed to get him up on the truck. When the Queen hurriedly gave her people the order to start, for she feared if the mice stayed among the poppies too long, they would also fall asleep. At first, the little creatures, many though they were, could not even stir the heavily loaded truck. But the Woodsman and the Scarecrow both pushed from behind, and they got along better. Soon they rolled the lion out of the poppy bed and into the green fields, where he could breathe the sweet, fresh air again, instead of the poisoned scent of the flowers. Dorothy came to meet them and thanked Little Mice warmly for saving her companion from death. She had grown so fond of the big lion, she was glad he had been rescued. Then the mice were unharnessed from the truck and scampered away through the grass to their homes. The Queen of Mice was the last to leave. "If ever you need us again," she said, "come out into the field and call, and we shall hear you and come to your assistance." "Goodbye!" "Goodbye!" they all answered, and away the Queen ran, while Dorothy held Toto tightly, lest he should run away and frighten her. After this, they sat down beside the lion until he should awaken, and the Scarecrow brought Dorothy some fruit from a tree nearby, which she ate for her dinner. All right, guys, that's it for this. That's it for the 2 chapters tonight. Join me tomorrow for chapter 10 and chapter 11. Have a good night, guys.